Well, good morning and afternoon, everyone. Hope you and yours are well and that you had a great Memorial Day weekend. Before I get going here, just want to be sure you can all hear me. So if you'd be so kind as to click on the raise hand button on the GoToWebinar toolbar, that will let me know we're good to go. Thank you, Gina. See a couple of raised hands, so I think we're okay to go on the audio front. Hopefully you can all see my screen as well. First of all, really appreciate you joining us for this webinar, especially right after a 3-day weekend. That's a really pretty ambitious move by us both, so I'm glad you made it. This is actually the second webinar in a law enforcement specific series focused on sharing information about digital transformation services and solutions. In the context of how we partner with agencies like yours, this really comes down to helping you transform processes and systems to improve upon the way that information, and in this case, would be your CGI data and or documents, is managed, especially from an ease of use and access standpoint. The first webinar, which we presented back in March, provided a lot of great information related to the digitization of microfilm-based case files and criminal records. If you have an interest in that topic and you didn't have a chance to attend or watch the recorded version we sent out afterward, please circle back with me and I'll make sure we get you the information you need. By way of introduction, my name is Jim Dietrich. I'm a senior account executive here at BMI. I've been pretty immersed in the information management industry for a bit over 30 years now, long time. And although my customers span across all of the major marketplaces, law enforcement is a vertical focus for me and really a personal favorite. Before I kick things off, just want to let you know that all attendees are currently in listen-only mode. Sorry about that. At the tail end of the presentation, we'll tend to any questions you might have at that point, and you can submit those using the questions panel within the GoToWebinar interface there. So don't be shy. Please enter any questions you want to submit. We can also circle back to deal with those later, of course. All right, without further ado, I'm going to dig into this meaty topic of legacy data migration. The agenda. Well, we've got a few things to talk about. They're highlighted there on the agenda slide, but we'll start off with a brief BMI Imaging Systems Company backgrounder, just to give you some high-level info about our organization if you're not already familiar with us. Then we'll talk a little bit about what the terms legacy data and data migration really mean and why you may need a legacy data migration service. Next, there are typically 9 key steps or task requirements, I'll call them, in any data migration project, and we'll touch on each of these. We actually have a blog article on the website. It's pretty comprehensive. A lot of the information we'll be touching on here is discussed there in more detail, so I would highly recommend that you visit the site and take a look at that blog. I'll quickly just hop over to our website. This is that blog article. Again, it's all focused on legacy data migration. And you'll find, again, a lot of the information I'll be going over here today is there, the definitions. We have a great graphic there that is very easy to follow that goes through the 9 steps. So you can see it's colorful, easy to read, but this is a great way to familiarize yourself with what's required from a process standpoint. That's the blog, and again, please check it out when you have some time. Of course, there are always some potential traps to avoid along the way, so we'll share some info on those, a few of them to help you avoid them, hopefully. Next, we'll do a quick digital reel overview demo to show you how a Tiburon case report in this case, looks after it's been converted and migrated. Digital Reel, or DR for short, is a BMI CJIS compliant document archiving or warehousing, you could think of it, platform. It's very intuitive and affordable, so something for you to consider if you don't have a target system in mind already, or really even if you already do. Then we'll share some possible next steps for you on your journey here and move on to the Q&A section that I mentioned. Just a little bit about BMI. We were founded as a document imaging and management company way back in 1958. And yes, that's over 6 decades in business. We're actually founded by the father of our current CEO. So what, you may ask, have we been doing for the past 6 decades? Well, we began as a microfilm conversion service bureau, hence the name BMI, which is an acronym for Bay Microfilm Incorporated. And we were working at that time with county government agencies to microfilm land records. Our services then expanded to include preservation microfilming of some leading newspapers and providing archival filming services to some large universities. And by the 90s, our industry was entering the digital age, and we were really at the forefront of that evolution. And we were helping clients execute microfilm and paper conversions, and we were developing and implementing secure electronic document management solutions, or EDMS, as the acronym goes. Last but not least, we came to specialize in legacy data conversion and migration services, and that's the focus, of course, of today's webinar. Today, we've got over 2,000 customers, 2 large secure production facilities, about 75 employees, and those consist of production and project management teams, software engineers, technical support, developers as part of that group, and then of course admin and the sales folks like me. In addition to everything else that we do, that workforce currently creates over 15 million images per month from various paper and microform formats. So we do quite a bit of scanning work. Security is always a key consideration for agencies when they're selecting a vendor to work on their criminal justice information, or CGI. We have a security officer and a team that ensure that our facilities, our personnel, and our processes are as secure as they need to be for this kind of work. And as you can see here, we're a CJIS compliant and listed vendor. We're also NIST compliant, and that is a federal information systems related regulation or protocol, and we're HIPAA self-certified. Last but definitely not least, we just completed a SOC 2 Type 1 audit. Not sure if you're familiar with that, but it is a third-party attestation report really regarding system and organizational controls. And it's a very lengthy, rigorous auditing process. We're proud to have completed the first stage of that. And now we're moving on to SOC 2 Type 2, and that audits our compliance with security policies over a particular time period. So essentially how we're conforming to those policies. The bottom line is that we take the security of your data very seriously, and this is a critical consideration for you when you're vetting vendors for a project that involves your CGI. Here are a bunch of words, and please don't try to read them all. It's essentially some technical jargon, but just want to show you that you can see our technical services group has successfully worked with many different systems. They have expertise with today's most common databases that are listed there and programming languages. Again, don't try to read them. The important thing is, the bottom line is we have the tools, the experience that are required to address complex projects that require these different kinds of technology. Bottom line is we can help our clients migrate their data from virtually any system, even those that don't appear here on the text-heavy slide. So please don't be concerned if you need our help with one that isn't listed here. So what is legacy data? Well, according to Business Dictionary, which is a source that we tracked down that gave a very concise definition. Legacy data is information stored in an old or obsolete format or in a system that's difficult to access or process. And that pretty much says it all. In your case, that information is likely criminal justice information, or CGI, that's comprised of images and data related to crime reports or case files, most likely. And those are items, of course, that you're required to retain. That's possibly, and that old or possibly obsolete system might be a records management system or an RMS such as Tiburon, or an EDMS or electronic document management system like FileNet. And FileNet came to be clear back in the 1980s. So that solution has been in place in some agencies for about 40 years. Obsolete here doesn't mean that the format or the system doesn't work. It just means that it's dated and it may no longer be supported. The problem with using obsolete systems or media formats is that if they break, for whatever reason, you could potentially experience a catastrophic data loss if no one's able to resolve the issue or recover your data. And that, of course, is a bad thing. Another potentially great challenge in dealing with legacy data is that the information is difficult to access in its current environment. And as I just stated, just because you may be storing your information in an obsolete legacy system or in an old, out-of-date format, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't access it, only that it's probably more difficult to access than it could or should be. In other words, your data quality may be just fine, but if you can't readily access it when you need to, what good does it do you? Now that we've defined legacy data, let's touch on exactly what data migration means. In her article, Data Migration, the Strategy to Succeed, Christine Taylor defines data migration as the process of transferring data from a source system to a target system. And she also makes note to differentiate data migration from data conversion and integration, which are additional project tasks that may or may not be required. Most projects we're involved in are relatively complex and require both conversion and migration. The conversion piece being the extraction and transformation of your data, and the migration being the movement of that transformed data to a new system and probably new storage devices and locations. Data integration relates to combining stored data that resides in different systems to create a more unified view for the users. That integration may be a desired or required part of your overall project, and if it is, it's something we can assist with. I think the most important takeaway here is that you shouldn't be too concerned about the specifics at this point. Just know that whichever pieces of the puzzle you need to fit together, we can help you understand and complete the process and create a successful project. If your archived digital information and data is currently being stored in an electronics data management system that's failing to meet your needs, or as I mentioned earlier, is obsolete, it's probably time for you to consider a data migration. One reason is that you don't want to lose all the records and information that are currently stored in your system. In a worst case scenario, your system software and or hardware might fail and the data stored there would then be inaccessible, potentially lost forever. If the records on your system are critical to your organization, and I'm guessing they are, then you really need to do everything you can to avoid that happening. Another reason to migrate the data is to preserve the original investment that you made when you first created the digital database. We're assuming that many of your legacy digital files came from media types such as microfilm or paper, and were scanned to digital as part of a backfile, as we like to call it, a backfile conversion project. Even if they're not mission critical files, the original project likely required a significant investment that you don't want to throw away. It's also possible that you don't even have the original hard copy records anymore. So if you lose your digital information, there's nothing really to fall back on. And a final consideration for migration to a new system is that your administrators and end users will very likely enjoy an enhanced user experience using contemporary software application and one that's fully supported by the manufacturer. If your system's now obsolete, it probably suffered a slow death, during which it wasn't regularly updated by the developer, and that probably kept it kind of stuck in time for some number of years. So this shouldn't be an issue with current state-of-the-art or a contemporary system. All right, the 9 steps. Legacy data migration projects typically include most, if not all, of these 9 tasks, which we're presenting on a series of slides here in an order of operations sequence. Today we'll just be touching really briefly on each of them. First comes project discovery. This is when we schedule a high-level kickoff meeting with the project stakeholders on both sides to define the high-level scope and the goals for the project. And at that time, we typically will define the roles and responsibilities of those various stakeholders. The next is the initial legacy system assessment. And this is when a lot of the initial technical heavy lifting, if you will, happens. And it includes an assessment of the data layouts, document file formats and classifications, and the index and database schemas. One of the key subtasks here is data mapping, and that's the process of ensuring that the proper file identifiers get translated from one system, the source system, to the next, or the target system. And that ensures data quality and integrity. And so that means that fields that identify a file in the source system are captured and correctly populated over to the new target system so that they relate or point to the correct data or file. If the data mapping portion of the project isn't executed properly, you could be in for a painful experience, and that would be like finding the data points to the wrong document or record, or potentially to nothing at all. We've seen this happen on projects that we didn't work on, that we've been brought in to talk about fixing. Project documentation comes next. At this point, we're ready to generate a detailed scope of work for the project that includes info about the timeline. Typically, this will be a few months, and really depends on a lot of factors, but it's typically a few months. And the project task and resource requirements are defined, as well as the cost. And I'm betting at this point, most of you are probably wondering, how much will I need to budget for a project like this? And the only answer I can really give you at this point is the classic, it depends. It's unlikely it would be less than 10,000 and more than 50,000. But we really don't know until we work with you to complete the first couple of tasks. So it'll be somewhere likely in that range. Once the statement of work or the SOW has been reviewed and we refine it with you and it's been approved, we can move on to generating the contract documentation and getting that executed so that we can get to work. Data acquisition is really when the rubber hits the road for the project. The legacy data needs to be securely transferred to our facility. Methods for completing the transfer typically include encrypted hard drives and SFTP. SFTP is a secure internet-based file transfer process. Very common, again, very secure, both methods are. So it really depends on what you're most comfortable with. And the volume of data is also a factor in making that decision. The milestone 1, or M1 as we like to call it, is a proof of concept stage or task in the overall project. It's an absolute requirement and a best practice in our world now. Once we've received and securely stored the data, our project management and technical services teams will complete the required software development work, the process flow creation, as we call it, sort of a workflow process for executing the project tasks, and then move on to testing, usually in small batches, some of the legacy data. After the internal testing's done, we will securely deliver that data sample to you for client-side review and approval. And so that, again, we call that the M1, and it's a key step in the overall process. The next step is production data migration. So this comes after the M1 approval, and really it's pretty simple to say that basically we're converting the balance of the data that wasn't covered in the M1 data sampling or proof of concept stage. So we convert the balance of the work. The final three. Next is inline data migration. This task isn't always required, but projects like this take some time to complete, and while they're ongoing, you may still be adding data to your legacy system, and we understand that that might be required. And if it happens, the documents and files need to be identified and processed so they're also migrated to the target system, and you can think of this really as a catch-up phase. Next, we are dealing with any exception identification and adjudication. So once all the data has been migrated, any exceptions to the rules and the process flow that we originally implemented for the conversion and the migration are identified. And if contingency plans have been put in place, those exceptions will be processed, and we'll use the rules that we came up with, of course, in working with you. If plans haven't been made, we'll work with you to adjudicate the exceptions so that the data can catch up really to the rest of the gang. Lastly, data delivery. Finally, we're essentially transforming, or the transformed data is formatted for automated import into your target system. And so we'll work around the specifications, depending again on that target system, to get the data into the right format. The delivery itself is usually completed in the same manner as the data was initially acquired. Again, that's typically an encrypted hard drive or secure FTP, also known as SFTP. Some traps to look out for. As is the case with complex projects of really almost any kind, it's important to know what to avoid as much as what you're supposed to do correctly. So here are a few traps to be aware of so you don't stumble as you move forward with a project. The first is combining the legacy data migration with another project, such as a microfilm or hard copy conversion. That's not to say it can't be done, but you're probably better off addressing the data migration as its own project so that it gets the focus and the resources it deserves. If you're thinking about tackling multiple projects at once, we would advise you pause and really consider whether it makes sense to do everything at once, or if it's cleaner and simpler to separate the projects into more of a phased approach. One of our worst fears is our clients expecting the data migration partner to handle everything. And while we're absolutely committed to doing all of the heavy lifting, the technical work, we absolutely need project stakeholders on the client side that can provide the information we need and the guidance we need on what they actually want. Otherwise, it's much more challenging to complete the project successfully and on time. Not impossible, but much more challenging. Another potential trap is not involving the right cross-functional project stakeholders, so the team members that actually use the information or know its purpose. The migration of data is definitely best characterized as a technical project, but without knowledge of how the information will be used once it's migrated, or which data is important to retain or to exclude, all of the tech time in the world won't matter. The same goes with legacy data migration. Bright technical people creating complex rules and mapping processes won't be able to finish the race if they don't know where the information needs to go and how it will be used. So the key here is that you should not move forward with the project in a technical vacuum, believing that because you have IT involved, it will simply all work out. Lastly, it's important to realize that the project timelines expand and evolve. I'm sure this is something you're used to. In general, we humans aren't so great at estimating how long even simple tasks might take. So you can imagine how estimating the timeline for something as complex as a data migration project might be akin to a dart throw. So it's important to have an end date in mind so that there's a target you can steer toward, but also be ready to flex your project schedule just in case anticipated events occur or other items become a priority and you find you need to put the project on the back burner. Okay, now we'll show you the brief demo that I described. Again, Digital Reel, or DR, is a BMI product. I won't go into a lot of pitch of sorts here on explaining why it's so great, but it's been in the marketplace for well over 10 years. It's very mature, simple, affordable, has a lot of great features. And so what we've got to show you here today is a report that we migrated for an existing customer, which is the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office. Again, it was a Tiburon report that was extracted, converted, and then migrated into Digital Reel. And I'm going to bounce back here over to the web, and I'm going to log in. So this is our sample site. We're going to be looking at some data that has been fully redacted. So we have permissions to share it, and it's been de-identified so that we won't be sharing anything confidential, of course. So I'm logging into the system. Again, I won't go into a lot of the features, but just in brief, kind of the lay of the land, the layout of the screen and the features. Again, it's very intuitive. We organize documents typically by doc type or record type. We have the ability to do global text searching within this data warehousing solution. So this particular field here will search through the repository for particular words or phrases, and we can show you how that works. But essentially, once a user logs in, we have the ability to select a doc type. In this case, I'm going to select Tiburon incident reports, and we only have one in here that we have permission to share. But what you can see is that this particular case report has been indexed at a high level by case number and by incident date. And so you may organize your cases during a migration in your target system. They may be organized in a similar fashion, basically by document type. Perhaps you would group them by year, and then within each year, you would have a list of case numbers. If I click on the case number here, we launch that document. And this is a 5-page case report. This is the viewer within Digital Reel. Essentially, again, lay of the land wise, we have some breadcrumbs here on the left, search capabilities for doing global text searching if we need to. There's a toolbar to the right with various tools related to zooming, rotating, clipping, lots of different tools. Printing if you have to. We also have annotation capabilities in the system so that if you have a need to redact or add notes, text overlays, that can be done. I just accidentally clicked to show you really what I'll call the thumbnail view of that particular case. So this is showing you small frames of the 5 pages related to that particular case. And to go to any one page and put focus on it, you just click on that frame and up it comes. You can also move through it serially using the right and left buttons here. But what you're looking at here is, again, it was an electronic, purely electronic Tiburon-based case report. The data was extracted and placed into each of the fields. So we built what I'll call a form slide that we placed the data on top of. And so this is some great programming. It basically allows for the report to be of any length, and it will push the data into the proper fields. And this kind of goes back to the data mapping that we spoke of earlier. This is critical that we map the data within Tiburon, in this case, over to the proper fields within this form, and we create the form. We essentially we burn the form, I'll call it, with that data in it. And so it flows very nicely. Going just to the second page here and showing you how the narrative basically carries over onto page 2. We get all of the data and we put it in its proper place. I'm going to go back here now and just give you an example. I think this is a powerful search capability when you have lots of data in a repository and you need to find something quickly. Maybe you're doing some kind of research into a project. This full text or global text search capability. So every single document, whether they're case reports that have been migrated or paper scans or microfilm scans that have been moved in through a digitization process, they're all globally text searchable. So if I simply begin to type a word that I know is within this particular document, what you could see happening here is Honda Civic was found two results within about a half second. So it's a very quick type of full text search, and you could see the context around Honda Civic. So a little bit of words before and after, so you can make a determination at that point which of these two links to click on. And once you do click on one, it'll take you directly to that page. Just take a second to paint here. And it will highlight the values on that page, as you could see here on the very top. So this, let me just move to the top. You can see the highlighting here. Very powerful feature, again, from an efficiency standpoint in finding what you need quickly. So again, that is a Tiburon report as it looks in digital real. Depending on your target system, the way in which you present the documents and search for them, and it may be different, but this just gets you a sense of how it can be done. Bounce back here to the PowerPoint and move ahead. So what comes next? First of all, you'll receive a follow-up email from us with a link to this recording and some additional related resources on our website as well. So if you want to continue, again, your investigation into this and you want more detail, our website has plenty for you to help you learn about the process, about our security in great detail, lots of things there. So please visit us and run through it. Lots of great blog material there as well. If you happen to be ready to kick off a discovery process, and we hope you are, there are a few things that you can really do to prepare for an initial call with us. One of them is to identify your legacy system or systems that require a data migration or conversion. And once you do that, next best step really is to determine the number of reports or records and the amount of data in size. So that may be, let's say, 100,000 reports and 10 terabytes of data. So it gives us some sizing information so we know how large or how small it might be. Lastly, identifying that target system. So if you're planning to migrate the data to a document management system and you're not sure which one at this point, we can definitely provide you with some guidance there. When the homework assignment is complete, please contact us and we'll work with you to complete the discovery process and generate the scope of work that we talked about. Okay, time for some Q&A. I don't know if any of you have any questions. I'm going to go ahead and take a quick look within the GoToWebinar panel and see what we have. Okay. I see one question. I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing this panel, so forgive me. The sizing on my laptop this morning isn't great. I think the first question that I'm seeing here is what version was Tiburon? And I do not have the answer to that question. I can get that certainly, but it was San Mateo County Sheriff is the customer in this case, and I could certainly circle back with you to provide the answer to that question. Another question that was posed is what are the limits on the fields, indexes, e.g. the case number, date, how many other fields? There really is no limitation. So all the data that is available to us within the source system can be accessed. And typically, if you're moving it into electronic document management system of some kind, you'll want to pick a subset of those fields that are key that could be used for searching purposes. But of course, all of the data is going to move over into the migrated report, so it'll all be searchable. But really, the indexes, usually we see 5 to 10, I would say on average, just the most useful that will allow you to get to the document quickly. I think that might be it. Let me just scroll down once again here. How do we handle redaction is another question from Tom. Tom, this is in our particular tool, it is essentially, you can think of it as an overlay of sorts with some security around it. So it's an object that we're able to place on top of the report. It doesn't modify the underlying content in any way. It's simply an object. And then we have security around that so that the creator can see through it. Any other users would be blocked from that content. But again, it doesn't modify the underlying content in any way. So it's a great tool for preventing, when you're disseminating a report, anybody from seeing sensitive information. How do we order? This is also from Tom. Thank you, Tom. How do you handle court order? Court order, again, I'm having a little trouble reading this, but how do you handle court order sealing of names? This is actually, that's a great question. Again, it really depends on your target system, but from within Digital Real, we are now actually exploring a sealing feature so that we have the ability to, through a very careful process, mind you, if we're going to be sealing a particular report, it's important for everyone there on both ends to understand that the data, if it's being purged especially, is going to be gone and gone forever. But that's not a feature we currently have in Digital Real, but it's one we're working to implement. And I could circle back with you maybe with a little bit more detail on that end of things. I am not seeing any other questions. Tom, again, you were asking about the need to print the report to a PDF to redact a name or other personal information. Yeah, so you can redact, and then we have the ability to save the content from Digital Real into a PDF file format. We have more flexibility than that, but you're asking specifically about PDF, and we can extract a report in its entirety or particular pages that are redacted. We can extract to a PDF, so it can be disseminated in that way. And I believe that's it for now. All I see, again, we can certainly deal with any trailing questions you might have after the webinar today, but a lot of great questions. I appreciate you asking them. Here's my contact information. So please don't hesitate to contact me either by phone or by email. We will be reaching out to you with that follow-up email, but you could certainly reach out to me before you receive that to kick off conversations or pose those, again, those trailing questions. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it, and look forward to working with you. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. I'm signing off.